meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board, I would firstly like to welcome any members of the press or public who may be watching today's meeting via the Council's website. Before we move into the formal business, for the benefit of those joining us online, I would firstly like to introduce myself, along with the members of the committee and the key officers who are supporting us here today. Excuse me. I am Councillor Graham Isherwood, and I am Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. I am joined by my board colleagues, named Councillors Alan Garbett, David Jones, Betty Rhodes, Olivia Rowley, and Ian Sanders. Alongside the elected members on the board, I am joined by Mark Tolson, who is the governance manager who keeps us all in order, Lynn Gascoigne, Overview and Scrutiny Officer, and Emma Wyman, the Committee Officer. I would also like to welcome Connor Derbyshire, who is observing today's meeting for the first time. Welcome, Connor. Connor recently joined the governance services as an apprentice, and I hope he will find today's management board meeting interesting. We will be joined this morning by Councillor Margaret Isherwood, Portfolio Holder for Children and Young People, and Beate Wagner, Corporate Director for Children and Young People, who will be in attendance for agenda item 6 on today's agenda. Before we move on to the formal agendas items, I'd just like to confirm today's meeting's procedure. We will take each item on the agenda in order, copies of which have been provided to members and is also available on the Council's website. At the end of the debate on each item, I will seek confirmation from the meeting that it agrees to the proposed recommendation. If everyone is happy, then I will proceed with our formal business. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Emma, is there any apologies for absence?
I've just received apologies for Councillor Ward.
Thank you. Otherwise, we'll a full turnout then. Agenda item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of July 2020. It don't seem that long since, does it? Agenda item pages 1 to 6. Could I ask members who were present at this meeting if there's anything in the minutes that is incorrect? I will take your silence as approval of the minutes. Sorry.
Can I ask, Chair, on page 5?
Yep.
Sorry, am I okay to speak?
Yes, of course, yeah. Sorry.
Right. On page 5, it says near the bottom, the first resolved, that the board receive regular feedback and this becomes a standing agenda item. There's no agenda item today, and I just wanted to very briefly say that we attended a meeting a fortnight ago, and the West Yorkshire are creating an investment strategy, and it's being written, and it will be submitted and result in a single pot funding, which will be it will be received and released in February. And obviously that's going to be a gap before the mayor is elected, but he or she will be able to make some changes. Meanwhile, I think the leaders are involved in putting this single pot funding together. And the scrutiny are looking at the budget, restricting pathways, particularly around the police communities, commission staff, and then overall submissions. So staffing is being looked at and funding is being looked at, and I think that's the main theme of the West Yorkshire meetings at the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Olivia. I was going to actually mention that in the agenda item 3, my chair's remarks, because Councillor Haddon, he's sending emails, and so has Ben, the Chief Executive anyway. So I think they're setting up meetings out now next one's in November to do with the governance of scrutiny. So we'll be reliant on coming back to the next meeting. So I was going to raise it in the next item, Olivia. Okay, thank you. So that's nicely covered my chair's remarks anyway. Agenda item 4, urgent items. There are no urgent items. Agenda item 5, members, declarations of interest. Do any members have interest to verbally declare in the matter before us? I will take silence as there is no interest to declare. Excellent. Agenda item 6 is Children's Services Budget Update. At the last meeting of the board, members had raised concerns over the forecast of 5.6 million budget pressures within Children's Services, and it was agreed to discuss this further at today's meeting. The finance report later on in the agenda shows that the forecast 5.6 million has since been reduced to 4 million, which is welcome news. So can I welcome Councillor Margaret Ishwood, Portfolio Holder, Children and Young People, Beate Wagner, Corporate Director, Children and Young People, to discuss the current pressures and the mitigating actions that's being taken. So could I ask you to start off then, Beate? I understand you're going to give a PowerPoint presentation, so you will have to share the screen. Is that right?
Thank you very much. I'm going to do that now. If somebody could let me know when you can see my presentation, I'd be grateful. Any luck?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to give you an update on the demand pressures and developments in children's services. What I'm proposing to do is to run you through the presentation, and then obviously there will be opportunities to ask questions of Councillor Isherwood and myself. So hope that's okay. I'll very briefly just set a little bit of context and remind us. I'm not going to go through some of these slides in details because people will know and understand. But just a reminder that we're 2 years on into the improvement journey since being judged to be inadequate and systemic failure in children's services in 2018. The first assumption would be that there would need to be an alternative delivery model, but that the Children's Commissioner appointed by the Department for Education as part of his investigations absolutely found that in Wakefield we had put the right measures in place, and that both politically and strategically there was capacity and capability for improvement. Monitoring has continued with Ofsted monitoring visits throughout 2019, and then by the end of last year, the Department for Education agreed that we didn't need a commissioner because progress was in line with what had been hoped for and expected, and that was confirmed in July 2020 when there was a further internal review from the Department for Education. Just a reminder that there is a whole governance structure around monitoring, supporting and challenging progress within children's services, both in terms of practice, but also from on a political level. So we've held 22 elected member development sessions since June 2018, and that's really to make sure that members have the opportunity to really understand key issues for children's services, visit children's services, and are able to ask questions and challenge us. We've set in place a senior leadership visit program, which ensures that senior leaders have an opportunity to have a line of sight and direct dialogue with the front line. 96 visits have taken place. In total of these, 55 were either by an elected member or included an elected member. We've had improvement board meetings. They've been chaired independently and have had the Department for Education attended, as well as the corporate management team and members. And that's really to ensure, again, that we have external scrutiny of progress. Children's Overview and Scrutiny meetings have had 14 separate reports on progress made against our improvement programme, and being able to scrutinise those reports. And now, as part of every meeting, look at our monthly performance report, which is called the Vital Signs Report. And those have been circulated through the lockdown period and through the virtual meeting time. We have a dedicated corporate parenting committee which reports into Children's Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which allows us to have a real focus on children in care and care leavers. And audit committee has also, on 4 occasions, had reports on children's services in particular. So just a little bit of where we're at. This slide tries to show performance, not so much in terms of outputs, but tries to get a little bit behind outcomes and how outcomes is improving. You may remember that we had 35 separate improvement projects as part of the improvement programme. The graph shows you that these have now largely been completed. There is different gradings to this, starting with amber, the very small slice. They are projects that are making good progress but haven't yet been completed. All of the other colours denote projects that have been completed and are in various stages of being embedded. So 29, a lot of companies now completely business as usual. That's the gold, and that ranges back to the 14% at Amber E, which are the, sorry, I've done it the wrong way around, 29% at Amber E, which are projects that are completed, but we're waiting for them to be embedded before they go into green, and 14% at gold, where they are completely now a business as usual, the way we now operate. The lines below show you the best measure we have for quality of practice, which are our case file audits, and the different line shows you the percentage of cases rated at different levels. So the blue line is inadequate as part of the case file audits, and what you can start to see is that the percentage of inadequate cases now is very greatly reduced. The brown orange line requires improvement, where the large majority of cases were. But the very last case file audit is now showing us that the good cases, which is the grey line, have started to overtake the requires improvement cases. So I suppose what this line shows is that quality of practice is improving. Good practice is now starting to be the majority, with a small number of inadequate cases now. It's always likely in every authority that there will be some inadequate work, and the point of this really is to make sure that we understand why that is and continue to improve. The next slide just shows you that some of the key performance indicators, so those that do measure larger numbers, actually, and our output indicators are also significantly improved. We know that caseloads are quite a good proxy indicators for quality of practice, because we know that unless caseloads are reasonable, the quality of the work is likely to suffer. And what you can see, particularly in the safeguarding locality teams, we've come down over the last 2 years from cases that were well over 30 on average to cases now between 15 and 20 on average. Our target caseload is to be below 20. Timeliness of visits, these are for every type of visit, so child protection, child in need and child in care. There are specific timescales within which a visit should be taking place. So, for example, a child with a child protection plan should have a visit every 2 weeks. These graphs measure the percentage of visits that actually hit the timescale, and as you can see, we're now around our target. All types of visits, around about 90% of visits within timescales. Personal and case supervision is important because it allows to quality assure on an individual basis cases and also performance of individual members of staff. So it's important it takes place. And as you can see, we've had low points of case and personal supervision back in towards the end of 2018, so below 50%. We're now consistently over 70 and 80%, which is significant improvement. And sickness is also starting to come down. We've had particularly at the beginning of the improvement journey, quite a number of our staff who've had both short and long-term sickness issues. That, with a lot of individual support, has now largely been addressed. So that's a little bit of context. So coming to the demand pressures and to the investment in children's services. So the base budget has had a net increase in children's services of 17.4 million. And the key areas of investment that have been required have been the sufficiency of both high quality staff and of placements. That's where the expenditures and that's where the opportunity over time also is to ensure that we continue to address the overspends which do remain. So this is how the money's been spent. 9 million to staffing with significant increase to our locality safeguarding teams. And that investment clearly has enabled those caseloads to be brought down with, because we've got significant more staff and more teams now to address the work. £6.1 million in the placement budget, in recognition that what's happened is that in the early stages of improvement, we have worked through a backlog of child protection cases and child in need cases, which has then led of a percentage of those children having required to become children in care. And 1.9 million on home to school transport, which is in recognition of rising numbers, not just in this authority, but nationally, of children who require education, health and care plans, and then for whom, if transport is required, the local authority is liable to meet those costs. So I'm just going to take you into a little bit more detail around why we are reporting an overspend this year and what we're doing about it. So this describes the green line being the number of discharges of children from care. The blue line is the number of admissions of children into care. The budget setting process last year, if you remember, sort of towards the end of the year, and if you have a look at September 19 on this slide, you could see that we're largely reporting a stabilized picture of the number of children coming into care, roughly matching the number of children being discharged from care. And it felt like we had reached a more stable position. What then happened in the autumn of 2019, we had an unexpectedly high number of children coming into care over this time. And I suppose this has really been what has got in the way of us continuing to be able to deliver to the budget. And I will explain that in a bit more detail in the following slides. We've done a lot of work around those children just to look again whether our processes for challenge were robust enough, whether there was anything else we could learn from those cases, whether those cases could have been avoided. And on balance, we couldn't establish any of those. It was those children were the right children coming into care. They needed to come into care, but they hadn't been able to be predicted as coming into care. So that bulk that you can see there between September and January really has led to an increase of children into care, which has given us a legacy into this financial year. What you can also see is that during the COVID crisis, there's been a limited number of children who've been able to be discharged from care because court processes have largely been paused, so only for urgent cases, so that children who may otherwise have had their care orders discharged or where adoption orders might have been able to be made haven't been able to be processed. But as we're hitting July here, you can see that discharges are starting to pick up and admissions are starting to come down. So as a result of the spike I've just described, we started at the beginning of the year with having to predict an overspend of 5.6 million in children's services, really on both placement. And at the beginning of the crisis, it's also fair to say we had a big recruitment campaign for staff at the beginning of March and were initially quite disappointed, particularly with the number of applications we were getting for newly qualified social workers. That has actually completely reversed over the last few months. And as you will see, we're now making significant progress in terms of recruiting permanent staff. What that's been enabled us to do, both making some progress in terms of our placements and making progress in terms of the recruitment of staff, is now enabling us to bring this overspend into line. And we're doing that month on month. So our latest, I know that your report covers period 4, but in period 5, the provisional forecast is 3.4 million. So we're hoping to continue to do more throughout the year to bring this overspend in line as far as possible. I think I've already covered some of this. So the main way that has been done is largely due to a really successful recent recruitment campaign for permanent staff and a recent success in increasing the number of in-house fostering placements we've been able to recruit. So when you think back to the autumn of last year, when you have such a large spike in children coming into care, it can be quite difficult to find the right placements in the right quantity. So you may end up in more children in outside placements than you would ideally need to place. And it takes a little bit of time to then make sure that you make up for that with in-house placements and making those available to any subsequent children coming into care, or in fact to enable some children who maybe were initially placed in residential care to bring those back to in-house foster care or in-house residential placements. We've got a lot more plans around this, particularly around placement sufficiency, including different types of fostering placements. So the Mockingbird is a project that has much better support mechanisms, much more peer support for children. We're doing a lot of work of a different way of delivering in-house residential care. And we're also developing a lot more options for our children leaving care. So some of the slides which I think highlight where the savings was made and where there's more to be done. So the blue line is the number of external residential placements. What you can see is that we have continued to be able to improve the number of residential placements we have to purchase. Some of these are very expensive placements. They can cost sort of typically around £4,000 per child per week, but can go up to £7,000 and £10,000. And particularly in the COVID crisis, some local authorities have reported extremely sharp increases in the prices they've had to pay for external residential placement. So bringing the number down, even from 48 to 36, has a significant impact on the budget. The yellow line is the external supported accommodation for our older young people. That is going up, but is a good alternative to residential care for some of the older young people who really don't need some of the intensity of external residential care. This is the really good news story because we've done a lot of work on our fostering recruitment, and that's really been going on over the last 18 months. What happened initially is we were probably losing as many foster carers as we're gaining, and that's partly because people were taking some permanent orders in respect to children, so either adopted the children they'd fostered and then could no longer foster, or took special guardianship orders, and some people really had come to the end of their fostering career and retired during that process. But what's happened over the last financial year is we were able to have a net gain of foster carers for the first time in quite a few years. So that gave us an extra 9 foster carers net last year, and this year we've already approved an additional 10 households even during the COVID crisis, and we've got 10 more going through the process. So what you can see is that the red line is what we thought we could achieve, and the grey line is what we've actually achieved, a significant increase in in-house fostering placements. Alongside this, we've done a lot of work to make sure that our in-house foster carers feel supported. There was an investment in fee uplifts as well towards the end of last year, and I think all of that's contributed to this, which is a real success story. External fostering placements is also still rising, more work to do, and as our in-house fostering increases, this will be very much a sort of second choice, and we'll continue to use external fostering placement in preference to external residential, or where we can't achieve a good match within internal foster care. But we do see that coming down over time, probably not as quickly because the main focus has to be on residential care. Our agency staff profile had been coming down, but in August we were still reporting 94 agency staff. I was describing how sort of between April and August our recruitment's been particularly positive as people have been starting with us. We've gone down to 67 agency members of staff. And we expect to continue to recruit permanently, to be in a position by summer of 2022 to not have to pay any premium for agency staff. So continue to use agency staff, but only to the same cost that we would have vacancies where we need to. So be largely self-sufficient within the staffing budget. These are just to give you a bit of an idea of the number of people that we have recruited to over the last few months, who are now really starting with us, and that's shown in those graphs. And if we had remained at the high level, that would have resulted in an additional spend of 1.8 million. So they're not savings as such because they were already factored in as a saving. But they have saved us some more than we were expecting because we're doing better than we had hoped. A lot more work in terms of placement sufficiency, so both making sure the right number of the right children come into care, but where they do, they have a good route into permanence towards both adoption and independence, and a lot more work to do on placement. So continue to improve fostering and the support for fostering, doing a lot more work to have high quality residential placements. We have 2 two-bedded homes for for our children in care. They're relatively new, and they have been absolutely transformational for the children who are living in them. We want to use that model and expand on it. So a lot more to do on bringing round the curve of numbers of children coming into care, and making sure the right children come into care. Not to forget, they are COVID costs, and they have not been included in this, and that's particularly around making sure that our own residential homes can complete a run. So we've had to spend more money on additional staff, as some of our staff have had to shield or have had to self-isolate. More money on home to school transport, and some additional spend on savings. But this is what's reported, and what we hope will be able to be met by the specific COVID grant. And I'm running out of time, so we'll just very quickly say that we have always done our improvement work alongside transfer work. So whilst we've absolutely spent energy on the 35 projects which have been around improving, particularly our practice in children's social care, we have worked with our partners to develop the Wakefield Families Together model, which is very much about getting away from referring and onward referring to having early conversations, really picking up the ideas of the Troubled Families and the Think Family programme, but reviving them, modernising them, and starting to shape them around our schools, who really see our children on a regular basis, and who are at the hub of being supported by other agencies to really make sure that we spot the children who need more help, but those children who can be served well by both their community and local services are served well by those. A lot of work also with schools around inclusion panels to make sure that our high rate of exclusions is also curbed. Links up with early help, so schools feel they're not alone, they have the right support from our services to help them as inclusive as they can be. This is just the plan on the page for Wakefield Families Together. These are just, I can circulate the slides to members afterwards. It's just really talking about how we're starting to get real compliments from children, young people and families about how they appreciate the support they're now giving. And a little bit about our staff, what our staff are saying. So from 2018 to 2020, these are the Have Your Say survey results, with a significant increase in staff who feel they're satisfied with their jobs, who are feeling they're now getting supervision, and they're getting the right support. Finally, we also do a social work health check, just which is very specific to the social work workforce, with some real positive results. Probably the best one of these is the last bullet point, where 86% would now recommend Wakefield to other social works, and I think that's been a really important part in our recruitment strategy. And my apologies for speaking for quite so long, but I hope that that's given a good overview of where we are.
Thank you very much, Beate. Has the Cabinet member anything that she wishes to add to that?
I'd just like to say that from the start of this journey that we're on, we have the ethos that we need to be proactive rather than reactive. The idea of identifying early what needs to be done to identify children and young families, so that we can be proactive in providing the support they need, rather than waiting until further down the line. And we have the more expensive interventions that we need to do with in social care. I think the team have done an amazing job actually coming up with new ways of working. We've got the new early help hubs setting off and the teams around. And I think when we're looking at the budget, it's not just about managing that budget. It's about making sure that we get the best for the children and the families that we're actually dealing with. And I think there's now things in place, there's new ways of working being embedded that will ensure that we do that and eventually get that budget down. Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, I'm quite pleased to see that performance is going up and costs are coming down. Hopefully they'll be meeting together at one point. But before I fetch Olivia and David in, has this COVID situation, has it helped, not helped, but hindered with the recruitment of social care workers, the agency workers?
So as this slide and the graph indicates, I think what we saw at the very beginning of the COVID crisis is that we really struggled to recruit. Sort of our recruitment campaign in March, people were very hesitant to apply for posts. It felt like particularly the newly qualified social workers. But what we have found since then is that we've actually been really successful. So to be able to recruit our agency staff numbers in that by that drop of around 30 between August and September, that is all due to some real success in the recruitment campaigns, and that will have a significant impact both on the quality of people as teams feeling stable and feeling like that they're a permanent team and they can develop together, but also on the budget, because we know that there is a premium on agency staff and additional expenditure that, whilst we've needed our agency staff and the expertise they've brought, really we want to get to a place where we don't need to pay that premium and we have permanent teams. And I think that's what we can now show, that we've managed to significantly reduce those numbers.
Thank you. Long may it continue. Olivia.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's fantastic that, we've made such progress and had such monies to be able to spend. And that's the important thing, that nationally, I think the LGA is saying that really more and more money needs to be spent in this area to actually get results that we now can show. I had a meeting during the week in my community, and we're actually saying that the food parcels had gone down, and then this week have started to go up again as people have realised they've lost their jobs. And also there's going to be a reversal of the benefits, so that additional monies were being given to people during the COVID, and now they're going to be withdrawn again. Are we anticipating that will result in a lot more children being referred, ones that probably aren't recognised now, but as the poverty gets worse, will that increase our numbers?
If I could start to answer that, I think we know that there is a absolutely direct link to child and family poverty and referral numbers and tensions within family households, which can then lead to difficulties and children requiring a referral for additional help and sometimes social care. So I do think it nationally will have a big pressure on the system, and we have to watch that. Now, one of the things people were expecting was a spike in referrals after schools have returned, and we haven't seen that in Wakefield. I think that's partly, to be honest, during the crisis, we have seen a fairly steady state of referrals because we've had a very robust system in place with schools and local safeguarding meetings that really tried to keep up the dialogue between schools' early help team and social care teams, but also school improvement advisor teams, just to make sure we continue to spot children who may be at risk during that crisis or who might have needed additional support. So we haven't seen an increase yet. But I think the impact on children, families, mental health, and of child poverty, I believe that will be a medium and a long-term issue that we're going to have to respond to.
Okay, Olivia.
Yes, thank you. I mean, it's a worry, isn't it? For not only for our budgets, but also for those families that are really worrying and coping and trying to cope at the moment. It's a very bad state of affairs, really. Thank you.
It is, Olivia. I totally agree with you. David Jones.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, there's one question in this, and then obviously there's a range of comments. I'll come to the question at the end. I think it's been important that this journey has been very closely monitored, which it has, and I think obviously we've been able to feel pleased that we've been able to see all the data that's being used to demonstrate where the improvements have taken place. It's been a tough journey, and it has demanded a lot of time, commitment, and of course expenditure to ensure the work is improved on. So I think, there's clear evidence now that the green shoots are being seen, and I certainly have to reiterate what Margaret has said in terms of the journey. Not that it's come to the end yet. I think it's important that we obviously keep on with the dialogue that takes place, and obviously we have great access to information, and equally we have access to officers as well if and when we ask questions. I think it's important that as an LA that we continue to be able to support these improvements for children and families, because that yes, there's been concerns about the way in which the budget has gone, and I know obviously BRT is very keen to make sure that it eventually does, income does meet expenditure. But I think it has been something that clearly shows that if you want to get a good quality service, you have to spend the money, and austerity doesn't solve any problems. It creates even more problems, I suspect. I think to reiterate what was a very good service from schools during the lockdown period, where they kept in contact with children who were either at SIN or CP. And I think it probably reiterates what obviously BRT said with respect of the fact that the number of referrals has not increased. I think that demonstrates what has been a good sort of communication route between schools and the service to ensure that when the child has been vulnerable, they're being able to be dealt with. I think I also take the comments as well about the fact it has been expensive to put children into certainly specialist care. And I know I've had sort of conversations with Vicky Schofield over some cases, and particularly, so I know that every attempt is possibly is being made to ensure that costs in that area are being sort of monitored. I think one other thing, and in fact it comes back to again what Olivia said, and that is about food parcels. And I think we have seen as well, there's been a steady increase in the last few weeks in the number of parcels that have been increased, and I certainly have a foreboding for what's going to be happening towards the winter time. I think it was good that the authority responded very quickly when the voucher chaos occurred towards at the beginning of the lockdown, and then for year 11s who had sort of officially left school on June the 30th. I think there was a good response both from schools and the local authority to ensure that children didn't suffer during the holidays. So I think there are obviously comments. One question, Beate, and that is with regards to obviously the cases that could be going to court, as and when the court service becomes more, is able to sort of become more active again in this field, are you anticipating any possible increases in the number of children whose cases do have to go to court? Thanks, Chair.
Beate?
So in terms of the main impact of the courts having been working on more of an emergency basis has been that they have deprioritized cases of children who could be leaving care. So where maybe children are living at home already under a care order, they're safe and we're satisfied that a care order isn't necessary. Those care orders haven't been able to be rescinded because the courts haven't wanted to hear them because they've only really dealt with the emergency cases. Same is true for adoption. So where adoption orders needed to be made, they haven't been made. That doesn't mean those children aren't living either with their parents or with their adoptive parents. But that sort of final permanence that it gives you to have that order made hasn't been able to be made. I'm satisfied that all the emergencies, so where either a child has had to come into care because of abuse or for another reason, that they have been dealt with. So I don't anticipate, I mean, that it may be that there are some of the planned applications will have stacked up as well, and they do need to be heard. But I don't think that there are cases that haven't been dealt with. They may not have been dealt with in court, but they will have been dealt with in practice where we've had to take measures. And where that measure has needed a court order at that time, then they will have been processed. So they've prioritised the highest risk cases, but that has undermined the more planned work.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Betty Rhodes who wishes to ask a question now. Betty.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Betty and Margaret. Very good presentation. I think, Chair, it would have been useful if you could have had this in advance, obviously to digest all the good news stories as well. One or two, if I may, Beate and Margaret. At the beginning of the presentation, there was percentages in terms of staff, and I remember that Beate said there was about 3% were proven inadequate in terms of progress. Do you have
I think we've lost you, Betty.
Does
any of the officers can reconnect Betty, please?
this?
We've completely lost you, Betty, or I have anyway. I don't know if anybody else can hear you. I'm sorry, I can't hear a thing. I can just hear it every now and again.
Same here, Chair.
Well, sorry, Betty, we're not going to be able to. Anyway, Beate says she can answer the question about inadequate audit outcomes. I think at this stage, that's all we can do, really, is we can't hear the question. Okay, Beate.
So I'm assuming that was the question. So those are the graphs that show you the outcome of our own case file audit outcomes and the percentage that are good, inadequate, or requires improvement. If you remember, when we did, right at the beginning, we undertook a case file audit of all of our cases. It was only a safeguarding audit at that time, and we found about a third of the cases to be inadequate and another, probably about 25% to be at the better end. So it's to now have 4% of the cases. I'm saying that because it gives you a little bit of direction of travel. Cases can be judged to be inadequate for a number of reasons. I would not expect of any of those to be because the child isn't safe or minimum measures haven't been taken. But we're quite tough on ourselves. So if we have undertaken a lot of work, but actually we can't see a measurable impact on the child, so things haven't improved despite our efforts, that might give you an inadequate outcome, because it's really saying we need to try something else, or we need to review what we're doing. It may be that certain processes haven't been followed that should be. You would, in every local authority, an outstanding local authority will have some inadequate practice, and that's what we're trying to get at. Our audits are all learning conversations. So even if you're a social worker who's had an inadequate audit, you will have had that as part of a learning conversation, so you know what to do to put it right. But we also need in any theme. So if we have 3 inadequate audit, and for all of them, I don't know, not convening a child protection conference has been an issue, then we would do some work on that, because we then suspect that that might be a wider issue.
Thanks, Beate. I've got Alan Gabbert, but I think she raises a point was Betty, in as much as that, could you send the presentation out to board members? In fact, I think it's that good a presentation, it really ought to go to all members of council. And I don't know, but I mean, there's that many good stories included in this that I think probably, I don't know, so I'm not into this sort of stuff, but maybe we could have a virtual members meeting for all members, because I think there's there's that much good stuff in it. Alan Garbutt.
Hi, Michael and Beate. In percentage terms, from when you were at the height of agency staff to where you are now, could you explain what the decrease is in percentage terms?
Okay, I think it was a different for different teams. So, for example, for the children in care teams, we might have been closer to 10 to 15% of staff. For our locality safeguarding teams, we're probably closer to 30% of staff. So, and at the height, I mean, we tend to take these in total numbers, because that's how we set our target, rather than necessarily percentage to all staff. But that gives you an idea. At the height of agency staff, we had about 135 members of agency staff. We're now, we were at the beginning of this year just below 100. And as I said there, I think we are now on 67. So that's just really to give you an idea of where we are with the numbers.
Thank you for that. I'm going to say it's a cracking presentation. And I think both of you have done very well in the 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Has any other members got any questions? I'll take silence as no, obviously. Yeah. Well, could I thank Beate and Margaret for coming to committee today? I agree with Olivia. It's an absolutely fantastic feat what you've done so far. And long may it continue. Yeah, there's some really good news. We tend to shout about the bad news, but not the good news. So if we could find some way of letting all members, elected members, know the current position. I know Beate said she'll send the presentation to Lynn. Maybe if Nina's with us, it may be a thing that we could do on a regular basis. Let people know how we're doing, because we are a bit stagnant. If you're not on a scrutiny or them sort of meetings, people aren't getting to know how good or how bad we're doing, actually, to be honest. So I'll leave it at that. And thanks Beate, thanks Margaret. And if you want to leave the meeting, you're more than welcome to. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Chair, could I make one final comment?
Of course you can. Could I stop you, Beate?
Sorry?
I said, could I stop you, Beate? Of course.
Probably. You can shut me up. Just to say a big thank you, because this is an absolute team effort, as much from elected members as it's been from the operational team. And it is scary when you see some of the headline figures. So thank you for all of your support and continued support for this. And I think it's always recognised by both by Ofsted and the DFE that without the political support, it doesn't work. You know, you can have the best people if you haven't got the political support. So just wanted to say that. Or to say that we're talking to Nina about reinstating the regular briefings we're doing for elected members, and Margaret and I were doing monthly briefings on the improvement journey. So if we can pick that up again, that might pick up just a bit about making sure we're keeping people in the loop. But I'll talk to Lynn about whether we can, just how wide we can circulate the presentation, because I don't see any reason why we can't.
That's lovely, and I agree with what Olivia's just commented. You do send us regular updates to every member, and you do that. I do appreciate that, but I think it would be better if we could do it like an online thing. Anyway, we'll speak to Nina about that. So lovely. Thank you very much, both of you. Anyway,
thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Right, moving seamlessly on to agenda item 7, which is agenda pages 7 and 8. This is the first time the board has discussed the council's performances since February. Quarter 3 report was circulated to board members via email while meetings were suspended. I think we all appreciate that. The performance Total Act took a backward step while all the staff were reallocated doing all the COVID work. So every effort's now being made to resume the normal cycle of performance. So with saying that, I'll introduce Joseph Quinn and also Louis Mansell, who has recently joined the team as an intelligence officer, supporting the intelligence function and complementing the ongoing work around policy. This is his first role in local government, so I hope he's not going to be too disappointed. And is he attending today as an observer? Right, Joseph, are you there, my friend?
I am, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to share a presentation, so I'll just give it a minute. If you could just indicate if you can see it, that would be really helpful. Is that okay?
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So hopefully you can see that now?
Yes, we've got that now. Well, I have anyway.
Okay, well, I will go on then, and I'll assume everyone can, but please do stop me if you need to, because I can't actually see the messenger system now. So I'll jump in, and then obviously if you do need to interrupt me, feel free. Okay, so as you said to begin with, this is a little bit of a strange update because during the COVID response period, we suspended most of our normal performance reporting to allow people to be redeployed or to focus on different areas. And that is now starting back up, but this is more of an overview of what we're monitoring anyway to help inform the actions that the council takes and or help other services take. So I'll just jump straight into it. So just to say really is we're monitoring a wide range of measures. I can't provide everything in a short presentation, but the numbers are vast, to be honest. This should give you a bit of a flavour of some of the most important metrics. And of course, you can ask any questions at the end. I will happily try and answer them as best I can. I'd say on the economy and business side, there's a mix of national and local data for some of the metrics, and timely data is only really available at a national level at the moment. And we'll start to add in the local data as and when it becomes available. We wouldn't normally report national data to you, but it's a useful proxy. And what we do is we use that to see if that's giving us any indication of what might be happening locally. So I've provided the information in a presentation rather than a formal report. And the reason for this is that the data and information is changing so quickly at the moment that anything I would have sent to you, say, last week would already be out of date at this point. So we're continuing to monitor it, and that's why we've done it this way. So I'll start with the economy and business, if that's okay. So we've been doing quite a lot of work in this space, especially around the council's recovery board, and there's also a subgroup to that recovery board that is focusing on our economic response. So what I'd say is that there's a high level of uncertainty, and the Bank of England's emphasised this, and there's a lot of predictions around the end of the furlough scheme, the impact, the winter economy plan that's been released, and there's a number of notable differences in the unemployment forecasts for quarter 4. So the Bank of England is predicting 7.5%, the LBR is predicting 11.9%. So there's a lot of scientific opinion which is divided about the potential impact of a second wave of COVID and any further restrictions that might need to be made on the economy. Now, one thing I did want to mention here is, so as we go through, is that unemployment and the claimant count are quite different, and sometimes they're used intermingly. So the claimant count is only measuring the number of people claiming a benefit principally because they're unemployed. However, some people who are classed as unemployed can't claim unemployment benefits, and therefore the unemployment level always is much higher than the claimant level. So I just wanted to mention that as we go through. Okay, so economic output then. So what we know so far is that the latest GDP data was published on the 11th of September, and what it shows is that gross domestic product grew by about 6.6% in July 2020, and it's the third consecutive monthly increase. But important to remember, it's only recovered about half of the total loss of output caused by the COVID restrictions. I'd say accommodation and food services saw the strongest growth of any industry between June and July, but that was coming from an incredibly low starting point, and it's still 60% below what it was in February. I'd say July also saw reopening of pubs, restaurants, which have accounted for a large part in that increase, and the next update of data will actually cover the area that included the Eat Out Help Out scheme. What we don't understand yet is whether that's just displaced trade and brought it forward. That would have been felt in September and October, and we'll start to see that as the information plays out. I suppose arts, entertainment and recreation are also being impacted by government restrictions, and although they haven't been impacted as much as accommodation as food, the sectors still growing, but it's still 31% below where it was in February. I'd say manufacturing is 8.7% lower in July than it was in February, but that was already starting to decline since the spring of 2019. I'd say transport manufacturing sector has recovered further in July, but remains really hard hit. Textile and clothing industry improved between June and July, which hopefully means good things for Wakefield and West Yorkshire. And then food manufacture saw a recovery, and that's also another key employer in Wakefield, so that's very important to us. We're starting to see some recovery in rubber, plastics, non-metallic materials, and that would include Nottingley's glass production, so that's also good news. Construction output as a whole is still around 12% below the level seen in February, and housing is still down by about 16%. I think it's probably just worth mentioning, actually, whilst we're here, is the local impact of the winter economy plan, which was released. So there was a job support scheme announced in there, and it's worth saying across Wakefield district, about 31% of all eligible employments have been furloughed, so that's about 50,000 jobs as of the 31st of July. Now, the most recent business survey found that 73% of our local businesses have used the furlough scheme, and for some or all of its staff. And then 99% of the district's businesses, which are SMEs, so will automatically be eligible for the new job support scheme. But it is significantly less generous than the previous scheme, and there are some concerns about what that might mean. However, we don't have the data yet to talk to you about what those impacts are. There's also been an extension to the self-employment scheme, and there's about 64% of the eligible self-employed population in Wakefield have claimed from this already. The average amount claimed has been about £2,500. Nationally, about 42% of the value of this support has gone to self-employed people in construction trades. So we can probably apportion some of that back to the Wakefield data as well. What I would say is that extension again is less generous than it was before. And then in terms of bounce back loan scheme, at the beginning of August, about 5,000 businesses across the district's 4 constituencies have been offered bounce back loans, and that's a total of 141 million. That's a take-up rate of around 42%. And then the business interruption loan scheme, at the beginning of August, 239 businesses across the district have been offered business interruption loans, and that's to a value of around £64 million. Okay, so unemployment benefit claims. So the latest data in August shows that Wakefield has about 13,450 people claiming benefits, and that's JSA or universal credit, depending where they are in that cycle. And the claim numbers in Wakefield district increased quite slowly actually between July and August, but that compared to March 2020, claimant numbers are up by 94%. So there's 6,485 more claimants in the district. And that increase actually remains lower than that seen across Leeds City region and as England as a whole. And the number of young claimants in the Wakefield district, 18 to 24, although it fell very slightly between July and August, the increases since March for this group are up by about 88%. So that remains quite a bit lower than across the Leeds City region, but it's still highly significant. So claiming rates are highest in Wakefield East, West and North wards, and that's followed by Airedale, Ferry Fryston, Nottingley and Featherstone. And there's been some increases, decreases in all these wards over the last few months, but nothing like the scale of increases we saw in April and May. It's probably worth saying that a recent publication of the PAYE data shows a loss of around 700,000 employees across the UK since February, and a flash estimate for August shows this continuing a gradual fall, following on from a sharp drop between March and April. So August was the first month of the furlough scheme wind down, where employees are starting to pay employer national insurance and pension contributions, and the fear is that more jobs will be lost as furlough comes to its end on the 31st of October, particularly in industries still partially locked down. And as we transition into the JSS scheme, we'll have to see how that really works. Okay. As I said, this is just the claimant count for 16 to 24-year-olds, and these are claiming out of work benefits. So that's JSA or universal credit. It's probably worth at this point talking a little bit about the Kickstart scheme now, which was launched by government. It involves essentially 6-month work placements for individuals where they'll get a national living wage, and it's formally covered the cost by national government. What I'd say on that is that it's still early days. We know there's been an awful lot of interest from businesses around the district, and we're expecting that to be quite successful for Wakefield. Some of the challenge for us now is understanding how we influence that programme, ensure that those young people don't just transition back out of work, but actually transition into other training opportunities or potentially employment. And we're looking at that quite heavily at the moment. This is some job vacancy data. So data on the 18th of September 2020 allows us to have a look at all of those job vacancies that are in the district or area and then look at it over time. And what I'd say is growth in online job adverts is continuing to go upward. Adverts for transport, logistics, warehousing jobs have seen the strongest recovery since the low point in May, and current vacancy rates for this industry are higher than the 2019 average. This is good news for Wakefield, given its prevalence of those industries in the local area. And I'd say vacancies in manufacturing and construction trades are also increasing relative to other industries, and they're getting close to the pre-pandemic levels. I think vacancy levels are currently highest in the East Midlands and lowest in London and Yorkshire and the Humber when compared to the 2019 date baseline. And then these is job vacancies specifically in Wakefield. So local vacancies are being advertised, and they're markedly lower than usual between April and July, but August has started to see a bit of an upturn in that. So as of 2nd December, the broad breakdown of vacancies in Wakefield are as follows. There are about 428 in logistics. Healthcare and nursing was the next biggest one with around 280, and then 116 social work, 114 teaching, 113 in engineering, and so on. It goes smaller than that. So we can provide all of those that data on request if people want the specific detail. This next one is just a little bit of a timeline around redundancies, and this is basically the number of employees notified at risk of redundancy via HR forms over time. And the reason I've put this in is just to give you some idea of the impact of where it's got to, and then, sorry about and what's currently happened. So just to give you an idea of the difference between what's happened through national lockdown and what happened in 2008 and beyond, and you can have a look at that. Okay. So this is on city centre footfall. So although we don't have individual footfall counters in Wakefield, it is captured nationally. So what we've seen is that Wakefield saw a slight increase in footfall during August, mainly towards the end of the month and bank holiday. But in contrast, for example, Doncaster has seen its footfall rise to above pre-pandemic levels. So also as Hull, footfall in some of the other areas, though, is considerably lower than ours, and that's particularly around larger cities like Leeds, Manchester and Sheffield. That is probably to do with their high level of student population in those cities, or at least that will be an influencing factor. I think August, of course, Eat Out to Help Out month, and nighttime only numbers seem to show a bit more clearly that August footfall increased on July, and that's probably reflecting some of that scheme. It's quite telling, though, that nighttime footfall in Wakefield is quite a bit further behind its journey than to normal daytime footfall, and nighttime recovery will be held up by supplying nightclubs, pubs, restaurants having to operate below full capacity, etc., etc. So it's that sort of stuff that seems to be holding us back in that sense. It's probably also worth working at home. So nationally, it's estimated that around 43% of UK jobs could be done at home, and before COVID, just about 5% of workers regularly did this, and only 27% of workers had ever worked at home. And now that working from home gap is closed, and a recent survey suggests that regular remote working has increased from 6% before the pandemic to around 43%. That will have significant implications for footfall, town centre retail, and all of those things as time goes on. So it's hard to make predictions about the overall office market. But for example, across firms where there's a lot of full-time remote working or more mixed patterns, that might be 5 days in 10, etc., they're likely to have quite an impact for a long time to come. So this is a slide on transport usage, and it just shows that nationally transport usage shows weekend car use is now back to baseline levels, but still slightly lower than normal weekdays. Commercial vehicle use is back to normal levels. Weekend car use is close to its baseline levels. Weekday bus use is increasing, and on Monday 21st September it stood at about 59% of normal levels, and that's compared to 10% at its lowest. Some of the recent increase in bus travel will be school related, because obviously as children have started to go back, pupils are having to use that. Train use isn't recovering half as quickly, and as of Friday 11th of September, national rail use was about 42% of its pre-pandemic baseline, but these are all important indicators for the health of your local economy. Okay, we'll skip. Other thing I just wanted to mention was really just about Brexit, and that's just to say, you know, activity's starting to ramp up here, and it's going to be a key consideration for our economy alongside the current recession. It's probably worth mentioning that under the Northern Ireland Protocol, which will start on the 1st of January 2021, Northern Ireland will continue to follow some EU rules, and this will make making border checks unnecessary. But that also means that certain goods arriving in Northern Ireland and other parts of the UK will need to be checked to ensure they comply with EU standards. Obviously, we have a large distribution network in Wakefield. This could have some impact there. And it's worth saying in September 2020, the government said that it's seeking to change parts of this protocol by introducing new law. You'll have all seen the news about this, so I won't get into it in too much detail, but the key elements really are there'll be no new checks on goods moving from Northern Ireland to the rest of Great Britain. It gives ministers powers to modify or disapply rules relating to the movement of goods. It gives powers to override previously agreed obligations on state aid, and the bill explicitly states that these powers should apply even if they're incompatible with international law. So what this effectively means is that we'll have more freedom if we were to decide that they wanted to use this. I would say that there was a conversation at the weekend between the Prime Minister and Europe, and there is some news out that they will move the deadline for agreeing a post-Brexit trade deal to around the middle of November. That still pushes us very close to December, and it becomes a business support challenge for us about how we're talking to our businesses, supporting them to transition into whatever new state may be, hence why we thought it was relevant to bring to this group today. So moving off of business in the economy and onto residents, there's a little bit more data that's fundamentally based around Wakefield in here, so I thought it'd be worth going through. Now, I know you've just had Beate on, so I do have some stuff on children's social care. I will skip through it quite quickly, and I'm hoping that this should reflect what you've already been told. So it's just to say, obviously it's a potential area of risk, and the COVID pandemic doesn't appear to have affected contact or referral numbers yet. Some people had been suggesting there'll be large spikes when restrictions were lifted, but it's to say that referral to children's social care from schools in a normal year is typically around 15% of the total, but that could be suppressed due to reduction in school attendance, although that's not been reflected in our local data. And I know Beate did actually just pick up this point with you in a minute, so I won't really dwell on it too much. Okay, so a little bit of information on domestic abuse. So there's been no significant increases reported to the police by the end of July. And there's been a lot of talk in the media about increases in calls to some national support organisations, but local reporting to the police has changed very little. And I'd also say referrals to the Wakefield Domestic Abuse Service, although there are reports again that they're seeing significant rises in contact from domestic abuse victims, we've not seen similar demands. And reports from our domestic abuse colleagues across West Yorkshire have also not experienced a huge increase to the service, but we're monitoring it very closely and we'll report back to it in the future. On homelessness, it's probably worth saying that the latest provisional local data, and this is up to September 20, shows about 291 households in temporary accommodation. This is up from 226 in March. There's a range of measures from central government, including emergency funding to help rough sleepers self-isolate. Rough Sleeping Task Force has had additional government funding for 2021. There's been some bans on evictions, extended notice periods, and also guidance for mortgage lenders around owner-occupiers. What we'd say is we are looking at this closely. We'll continue to work and support this as it goes on, and we'll report back to you progress at a later meeting when we resume our normal performance reporting. A couple of other things to say is this is COVID-19 cases in the area, and it's just to say Wakefield was an area of concern between July 17 and September 4, and we are again now from the 2nd of October. There's other more stringent restrictions in places across West Yorkshire, which you'll already know, and implications of a second wave. We're currently having a look at the shielding programme, which is being reviewed, and we're expecting more information out about that this week. And then just to say, there's a constantly changing policy environment at the minute. So, the introduction of Rule of 6, working from home where possible, 6-month outlook to March, winter economy plan. What we're just trying to say here is it's a really quick, fast-moving picture at the moment. We're trying to update as far as we can, as quickly as we can, but we are very much in a responsive mode to what's coming out of those things. And then the last thing to just say is that on the last overview and scrutiny report, there was a question around whether a local measure could be developed to give a better picture of employment rates. We've had a look at this. We don't think there's anything we can do specifically, but what we would say is small area profiles are now being published on the JSNA website. That includes employment rate and claimant count data down to that area profile level. So that should be able to provide some more information if you want to see those. And I can happily circulate some examples if you want. That's everything I have in the presentation, but obviously I will take questions as required. And I'm going to stop presenting now, and then I'll be able to see any messages that pop up.
Okay, Joseph. As ever, fascinating. And I just don't know how you get your head around all these graphs and everything, but to see it put as you put it, it's very enlightening. A bit concerning about the unemployment. And will the seasonal work make a difference to your graphs and figures? And
it's hard to say, and it really is about what happens with restrictions, what happens with redundancies, how many people access the job support scheme. So we are monitoring it closely. We are making sure that we've got support in place. You'll have seen some stuff coming out of the Recovery Board, especially around help at hub schemes. So we're trying to make sure we're in local communities. We're going to be offering support with debt advice, employment support, working direct with businesses. So I think what we can say is we are gearing up to be able to support more people in this space as quickly as possible.
That's great. Thanks, Joseph. Olivia.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just go back, Joe, to Kickstart and
Yes.
the job vacancies?
Yes.
I'm just concerned that Kickstart is essentially taking people out of the unemployment figures for 6 months.
Yeah.
And how do we ensure it's not cheap labour? And how do we ensure that the people at the end of 6 months are able to find any employment? Because what you mentioned was that there are job vacancies, but particularly in nursing and social work, what you really need qualifications, and they take a lot longer. So those vacancies can't be filled from people with that are doing Kickstart. So where will the jobs be? And I'm obviously particularly concerned at my own ward being mentioned, because the city centre wards, the main employment is in shopping. And if that's gone, then we're going to see an even bigger rise in unemployment in those wards. So what's going to happen with Kickstart? And can you elaborate after the 6 months?
Yeah, it's so it is difficult, and some of those things you've raised are concerns that we have all expressed. So as what we're doing as a council really is two things. So I've registered as an intermediary to help those businesses that want under 30, but we're also bringing together a partner group, and this is from some of the people on the recovery board, but wider, to see how we influence those intermediaries who are acting in the district to act in a way that helps to create a more developed scheme. So when I say that is, we're looking at how we do wraparound support for further education. We're looking at how we transition people into employed different programs, be that apprenticeships or other vocational training. And we're also talking to DWP, who are around the table with us, about how they work with businesses to ensure they're not doing exactly what you've just described around cheap labour. So that will be about talking to them about the job vacancy, monitoring the situation, making those businesses understand the benefit of that experience and whether they then can create a longer term role. I guess the challenge is beyond those 6 months, we don't quite know what's going to be happening with the economy yet, and we don't know what's going to be happening with employment rates. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we are aware of the things you're saying. We are thinking really carefully about how we influence that provision in the district to make sure that it's high quality. It's going to be a challenge, and it's something that we've got to do with partners. So we've got people around the table now, and we are also working with DWP to make sure that they're doing that checking role to make sure that people who go into businesses get really genuinely valuable experience that will help them to move forward into more sustainable employment. The other thing we'll be doing is we'll be continuing to monitor vacancy rates, and then we'll also be hoping to make sure that what happens is the people who are getting experience and skills are transitioning into the areas where we think there's going to be vacancies in the future. So it's challenging. I understand everything you've said there, and we're just going to have to work with it as best we can. We think the challenge really is about how we make sure that sits in the wider environment around employment support, job vacancies, and does not do what you suggested, and it acts as a proper route for transition for young people. The other key thing to remember though is and this is something we've been saying very hard, is that a lot of people who might get displaced won't fit in that young person category. And although there has been an impact for young people, we can't take our eye off some of our longer term unemployed residents, some of those people who may have been displaced who are slightly older, and then that might mean that actually it's more challenging for them to get back into the employment market. So we've really got to make sure that we are, as a council, offering a support network across the entirety, not just around overly focusing on the Kickstart scheme. Does that answer your question, Councillor Rowley?
I suppose it does. I mean, the point is, the reality is that it's going to be extremely hard, and it's going to be hard for areas like Wakefield. And yes, we have a lot of young people and older people who will have a hard winter ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we've got to do, and what we're trying to focus on, is make sure that as and when these, because we have to be upfront and honest about it, unemployment is probably going to continue to rise in the district, and job vacancies are probably not going to be as high as we'd like, which means it will be harder for people to get back into that employment. And what we have to do as a council is make sure that we are there to support them to transition back. We're very clear that's the key, but also to mitigate some of those impacts. So some of the work that's coming out of the Residents Recovery Group is there to say, as this happens, we want to support you in the moment, but also help you move back towards employment as quickly as possible. honestly, it's really hard to say this is how that's going to play out. But what we do need to know is that, you know, it's going to be an area of increased focus for us, and we won't be taking our eye off that. And I can report back regularly on how that's going.
Thank you, Joseph. David?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Joseph, for a really detailed analysis of our performance in the district. It's really much appreciated. I think one of the questions, obviously, that comes to mind is that we have a great deal of comment being made about, you know, if you can work at home, yeah, please work at home. But I know, and like all our sort of colleagues know, that around this district, there are a lot of people who don't have that choice. Yeah. How are we, though, given the fact that we're looking like that we're in towards a second wave, or in fact with continuation of the first wave, we ensure that sort of workers are protected as well as can possibly be, and not being sort of taken advantage of by employers, to ensure that their health and safety is there at the front all the time? Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question, and it's something we have been looking at intensely. So there's been a number of things that we've been doing so far, and one of those things is about interpreting the government guidance, ensuring that that guidance is really clear, producing bespoke guidance for different industry types, particularly those ones that we know involve people needing to be in the building to do it. And the difficult challenge about this is that most of those jobs that require you to be present in the workplace tend to be more foundational jobs that are less well paid. And the danger is exactly what you said, is that we put those people at risk unfairly. So what's happened is we've produced bespoke guidance. We've taken it out to business. We've made sure that every single business that we know of has had that guidance, and we've made it, you know, and then what we're also doing is we're out and we're checking compliance of businesses. So we're out in the district. We've currently just set up a compliance line where people can come and contact us if they're seeing non-compliance, or they're in the workplace, they're feeling there's non-compliance, and then we will respond to that as well. And we're developing a report around that, so that we'll be able to report those number of concerns, where those concerns have been geographically, and then as a council we'll respond accordingly to that. And how we're trying to do this is work with business and with workplaces. And what we are finding, if I'm being deadly honest, is the absolute vast majority of businesses are trying to create a safe environment for their employees. So the good news is what we're seeing is a high level of compliance from businesses actually locally, but we're not going to take our eye off it. As I said, we're going to continue to report, we're going to manage it. We're going to have city centre marshals out quite soon, so you'll start to see them around the district, and they'll be out talking to businesses, offering a helping hand, advising people as well, but also reporting where we have concerns so that we can then address that with other people. We're also doing that with the nighttime economy, and of course through the track and trace programme, and that work locally. Public Health are also working intensely with businesses who have any kind of outbreak in any sense. So that means that they're able to go in, advise, make sure that that business is safe to be open.
Okay, David.
That's very reassuring, Joseph, because clearly, you know, obviously you pick up rumours when you're out and about as a councillor in the ward. You hear stories, and I think it's been good to know that when I've picked up one or two, and I have passed them on to Public Health, you know, they have acted on them. So I think you're quite right that we do have to be on the front foot with these things. It'd be good to see the effectiveness of these marshals who are going around to make sure businesses are complying with the regulations. So yeah, that's very reassuring, Joseph. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I fully understand what you're saying about public health. I've done exactly the same myself, David, and you do feel very reassured that if there's any outbreaks, they seem to be on the ball straight away. Welcome back, Betty Rhodes. You're not going to leave us this time, Betty, are you?
Hello, Chair. No, I didn't leave you. For some reason, I was cut off altogether. Can you hear me okay now?
We can hear you now, my dear. Yes, you
okay.
Carry on.
Good, thank you very much. I got back halfway through Joseph's report, and excuse me, can I just say, Joseph, from what I could see of the report, very useful, informative report. I just want to pick up on a few things, if I may.
Of course, yeah.
First of all, can I echo Councillor Rowley, Olivia's comments about our city centre wards, North Ward being one of them, as Olivia's and West Ward. You've mentioned those three, as you've mentioned other wards across the district. Olivia's points are well made. Could I ask, in terms of the wards that you've mentioned and the areas you've mentioned, I know there are challenges. Cineworld is the latest in our ward. They're temporarily closing down, another loss of jobs. What are the targeted measures, if there are any, that you're trying to overcome these challenges with? And you mentioned working with partners. Who are the partners that you're working with? That's the first one. The second one, Joseph, is good to see about this confidence line where people who feel that there is something wrong can ring in. As you know, a lot of people are actually pleased to have a job and may not feel that they want to blow the whistle. What kind of confidentiality is there around this line to protect people who do want to let you know that there is an issue? You've mentioned the marshals. First of all, from my recollection of the government on marshals, these were going to be volunteers. What's the status of these marshals? What powers have they got if somebody doesn't want to adhere? For instance, the rule is that people must wear masks in entering stores, etc., unless they are exempt. I know of places that there isn't even a notice outside reminding people that they must wear a mask going in. What training will the marshals have in speaking to these organisations and reminding them of their own responsibility, as well as trying to protect the public and the public protecting them? I think, as you say, Joseph, there are lots of challenges around. And lastly, how are you as a group working with the combined authority for schemes and projects either through the LEP board or where they have a multi-responsibility across all authorities to see what their partnership role can be to support each other? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Betty.
Okay, I will, if okay, I'll start with the wardens. And just to say that this isn't a new thing in Wakefield. So we've been, since we started to reopen the public realm, we've had wardens on a volunteer basis out and around in the district. So actually, you know, I've done quite a bit of that. Graham West in the council has done some of that, and we've actually been out, and so a long time before these were mentioned nationally, we had that. And the role of those wardens is not to enforce, but is to support. So they'll be giving advice, taking advice, but noting where they don't see compliance. That will then get passed to the relevant enforcement part of the council and or police. So what that means is, in effect, is that they're not a enforcement role, if you like. They're an advice and guidance and data intelligence and collection role. What we're then doing is tracking that information, which kind of links back to your point about calling in. So what I would say is, what we're saying to people who contact the councillors is, if they have concerns, we're not asking them to you know, for want of a better word, we're not asking them to, you know, report their employers or those things. It's phone, let us know about your concerns. We reassure that we will look into all of those concerns, but what we're not doing is capturing their personal information, who's reported it. We're just going to use it as intelligence for how we target our supportive guidance with business. So what we're not trying to do is to go in heavy-handed and say, you know, we've had a report, you're not doing things right. It's not about that. It's about us trying to work with business and others. And it's not just business, it could be the public, it could be parks, it could be events, but, you know, it's a number of things. But the point is, I guess, is that we will respond to anything anybody reports to us by investigating it. We won't assume guilt, we won't assume non-guilt. We'll just go in and we'll have a look at this. And therefore, we won't be going, you know, Councillor Rhodes has contacted me and she's concerned. It will be we're going into the business in a friendly way to understand how we can help them more to comply, because we're working off the principle that actually everybody wants to get through this, and the best way to do that is to work together. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question about confidentiality, but the point is we won't be attributing any of the information to individuals, so that's should take care of that. In terms of the wardens, we have made the decision to move to employing some people to do that now, because what we recognise is there's a value in the continuation for that individual. So that is, they will from being able to do it day to day, they'll learn things, they'll understand better how to work with residents, how to work with businesses and those things. And what we're doing is they will have some quite significant training in terms of what the current guidance is saying, what we're looking at. They will have daily briefs every morning. We'll be taking the information that we receive via people phoning in, reports, or just anything, including like what the local infection rates are, those sort of things. And what we'll be doing is targeting our marshals in areas where we feel extra support might be needed, and we'll be doing that route planning almost daily. So we've set it up in our reporting system, what is called Power BI, and what we'll be able to do is track information that gives us the intelligence to target our support measures into the right parts of the district, because Wakefield's a big place really, and we can't cover every space all the time. So what we want to be able to do is be intelligent about where our support is. And we absolutely recognise this is not just about Wakefield Centre. It's about all of our towns and areas, and there will be a visible presence in all of those places, and that's something we're really committed to trying to achieve. Okay. The other question you asked me about partners and local responses. So there's two elements to this really. There's two subgroups that are working below the Recovery Board, and they're both partner-led. So that means they're not led by the council but an individual. There's a business one, and the chair of that is the local Chamber of Commerce, but also on there is the FSB. There's some WDH are in that space, DWP are in there, and then there's also council services, and they're tasked with understanding what the local support might look like for these businesses. So some of the things they're looking at is enhanced business support to help people transition whose business has been affected, looking at new opportunities, how we use local procurement to support those businesses. So the challenge really for us is right now is to keep business alive and make sure no good businesses in the district are lost because of a temporary interruption to their trade. So that's what we're doing on the economic side, and with that we're hoping to create that emotional bank account with businesses about how they manage their vacancies, how they manage their people, and work together with them to make sure they've got the support they need to survive. On the other side, we have a residents group, and that is currently chaired by the Citizens Advice Bureau. But within there's also WDH, there's DWP again, there's Nova, there's other individuals that from around the council who can support in that, and what they're particularly focusing on is making sure there's a point in all communities where people can get extra support, be that with financial advice, credit, employment, whatever that support need is. We're looking to be available to them in their local place, and that's really important to us because there's reduced travel, increased risk, all those things. We want people to know that the support is in their area, where they live, where they go about their day, where they're employed. That's really important. So, and those sites we're working through now, and we'll be doing it through the community, through community support networks, and there'll be a way of doing that either physically or remotely. So we're looking at how we support that remote bit as well, and the key to that really is about people being able to get the support they need in their local community, and that's what we've been focusing on. Does that answer all your questions? I was scribbling them down as quickly as I could. I don't know if I've missed any there.
Right. Thank you very much, Joseph. The last one was working with the combined authority and the LEP boards. Yes. That was the final question. Can I just come back, Chair, and just comment on some of the good news that Joseph has mentioned in terms of support out there for businesses and the community? First of all, Joseph, what is the confidential line and how is that made public out there for anybody who wants to use it?
Okay. So
what's the number? If it's going, do forgive me saying this, if it's going through our call centre, then as you know, at times they are inundated with calls, and I would hate for anybody who wants to contact not to be able to get through or to be put off by having to wait a long time. Yes, I was aware of the authorities' interventions, working with the police and the environmental health and our own teams. And obviously we do recognise it's all across the district. I'm pleased to hear that there are some more marshals going to be employed and trained. I understand the position that you take in terms of where there are issues with businesses, etc., that you try and support and point them in the right direction. I think overall, not just in Wakefield, but I'm sure you will avoid it, I hope, that we're not getting out mixed messages to the community as a whole in terms of how if certain things aren't adhered to, that the enforcement is not going to be an option, because I think a lot of people that we speak to as elected members are very concerned about mixed messages from government, understanding the messages, and at the same time the comment is, well, and I quote, why isn't somebody doing something about it? And I'm sure you've heard that as well, Joseph. Yeah. But those are my last thoughts on your answers. And really, I know there are challenges ahead, but I think we've got to get out the positive side of what we're doing, as well as the issues that if it doesn't happen, as an authority and as people involved in partnership, then there are consequences.
Okay. Yep. So two things I'd just say is, just to be really clear on that, is that enforcement will take place where it's required, and we have boosted the number of people we have to support that function. So we are anticipating increased activity there. It's just we want to do it, we want to try and encourage first, enforce as a last resort, but enforcement will happen, and please don't be concerned about that. We will make sure that that's the case. The second part around the line is it is the call centre line, but what we've done is we've boosted the number of staff in there and also built a triaging system into our new CRM to ensure that we can cope with the demand. So we're actually putting extra resource in there to make sure that we are available and contactable as and when required. On your point about the LEP and combined authority, you're absolutely right. I didn't pick that up, so apologies for that. What I would say is we have Tom Stannard, who is sat on the LEP recovery board, and then he's now sitting on the Wakefield recovery board and reporting back where there's any correlation of activity, anything we need to work with them on, or any opportunities to pulling support from that level. So that link is well founded and made through our corporate director, Tom Stannard. Does that cover them? Is there anything else you want me to come back on there?
That's fine, Joseph. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Joseph. As ever, I always find your reports absolutely stunning. I really do. I find them fascinating, and they're always very well presented. And I think you put it over really, really well. Once again, do you think we could have the slides sent to the board members?
Yes, of course. And just to say to your chair whilst you're there, if there are any areas where you feel you want some more detail, extra focus, you can contact me at any point and we'll happily provide that. And I'll ensure the slides are circulated to the group.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Joseph. Very interesting. Right then, move on to now agenda item 8, which is the financial monitoring report. Have we got someone to present this report?
No, Chair, it's just your usual report that's presented at each meeting. We haven't got anybody attending for this.
Yeah, okay then. I mean, I think there's a lot going off here. I mean, just to throw in the mix, a small issue called Brexit, plus the December settlements, and we'll have to wait and see if we're in a position to cope with all this lot what's being thrown at us. Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 9, the executive leader's forward plan of key decisions, page 25 to 27. As you can see there, there's one or two there that a lot's being done anyway. A lot's being done, but there is some that we need to, if we feel we need to have a look at, we can do. Pleased to see at last the gypsy and traveller accommodation looks like being sorted. I don't think I have to tell many members here that the problems that we've had, especially in Featherstone this year. I think I've had about 10 visits from our traveller colleagues. And the sooner we get this sorted out, the better. Has anybody any questions or any comments on agenda page 9? No? Thank you very much then. So all it leaves me to do is to say that the date and time of the next meeting, which is Monday 14th of December at 10:30 a.m. And I'd like to thank Ian Sanders for offering to fetch the sandwiches, pork pies, mince pies and everything else that we need. Thank you very much, Ian. It's very kind of you. So thank everybody for their attendance, and I'll say good afternoon to you.